Welcome to Soul Therapy. I'm Katie.
And I'm Kate, and this is a space where we take a deep breath, dive into healing, and laugh a little along the way.
Think of this as your cozy corner for exploring how to feel better, grow stronger, and live with more ease.
We'll chat about everything from practical tools to soulful insights, all designed to help you connect with yourself and navigate life's ups and downs.
We've put together this Soul Therapy session series to help you to come back into alignment.
By alignment, we mean living with expression of your true self and values, feeling centered and grounded in yourself, and with an inner peace, trusting in the flow of life and your role within it.
So listen along and join in with the exercises, and let us know how you get on. Ready?
Let's do this.
Welcome back to Soul Therapy. I'm Katie.
And I'm Kate, and today we're going to talk about navigating the life stages.
So I think the thing is that we all know things are going to change as we go through life, right? We all know it's not going to be the same from one decade to another. But sometimes it can still be a bit shocking when things change so critically and fundamentally for us sometimes. So this moving through those stages can actually, it holds not just maybe an apprehension of what's coming or where we are, but it also holds a kind of bittersweetness of having to let go of some of the things that we moved through when we didn't really realize that they'd be gone, maybe.
Yeah. I mean, life transitions can be some of the most exciting and the most stressful times of our lives, right? Because they generally do involve letting things go and stepping into something new and stepping into a new life, which of course can be scary for people.
Yeah, definitely. And I know as well that coming through life, it was a bit shocking for me actually to realize that I was kind of having, I guess, what people would have thought of in the past as a midlife crisis. And I mean, I don't think of it as that anymore now. I call it an awakening now.
Yes,
I think of it
yeah,
that way because I
yeah.
feel like it's given a lot more than it's taken from me. But it definitely shook me awake. It definitely wasn't such an easy or smooth transition, maybe as some of the ones in life have been. I guess that's the same for everyone, though. Some transitions are easier, and some have kind of more bumps on the road.
Definitely, yeah. And I mean, I can't speak to the midlife crisis, but I can definitely speak to the quarter life crisis. And that really rocked my world at the time. And then you get through these transitions and you look back and you kind of, learn to appreciate them more because you see how much you've grown and changed. And a lot of the time it is for the better, right? Even if we can't see it at that time, we look back and then, like they say, hindsight's 2020 and things become more clear. But when you're going through these life phases and life transitions, I mean, it can be like really stressful. It's that idea of like the unknown, and you're kind of in this stage where you're leaving your old life behind, but you've not fully stepped into your new life. So it's kind of like you're in this liminal stage.
Absolutely. And it is that combination. I mean, fear and excitement are very similar emotions that we're looking at in a different way. So they feel very similar in the body in a way, because fear is just the expectation of a negative outcome, whereas excitement is the expectation of a positive outcome. So they are very, very similar in the way they are felt. And actually, we can kind of choose, I've found in myself, to move between them.
Right.
So when I'm in fear, I can, with compassion, ask myself, what am I afraid of? And assess whether that's rational, whether it's telling me something, whether it's a messenger. And then if it's not rational, I can ask myself, hang on, I'm doing this for a reason. What's the reason I'm doing this?
Right.
And what's the possible good outcomes? And I can kind of talk to myself about being excited about this rather than being afraid. So find some alternatives to alternative paths if things do go wrong. Sometimes fear can bring up some things that you might need to make a bit of a plan for, or have a little of an idea what you might do if.
Yes.
It's your body's warning system in some ways. But then once you have that, you can kind of move more into the excitement of it. So shifting that emotion from one pole to the other.
Yeah, and a lot of the time it is that idea of perception as well. Like you said, fear and excitement are very similar feelings, so it's not getting them confused either. It's like you know, if you're feeling a certain way and maybe it is excitement, right? Maybe it is a direction of, oh, this is what I need to do because it lights me up and it excites me. So don't confuse that for fear. Or if you do think it's fear, sometimes the best thing you can do is face those fears. And then when you get to the other side, you're like, oh, that wasn't so scary after all. Right?
I had that for my quarter life crisis. I really shifted my life a lot, across the world, different job, different. Yeah, it was a big shift for me. But I definitely felt within it those moments where I was really, really afraid. And when I looked into that, I recognized that there was just as much excitement as there was fear. It's just that my body was focusing on the fear, because I guess that's the evolutionary mechanism, right? We focus more on the negative than the positive. But actually, I was really, really excited about what I was doing, and I was really trusting myself that I had this, and that if everything didn't go well, I could turn around and make back what I'd had before, what I'd given up to make this happen. Because I think sometimes that comes into it too, in these life stages and these transitions. What comes into it is the idea that you actually do sometimes give something up in order to move into something else. And I know that there's a big, big thing about having it all, but essentially, you know, from my circumstance, I was moving from living full time in Dublin in Ireland to spending the majority of the time in Mozambique. And the thing is that you actually can't have it all in that respect. I can't live the majority of the year in Ireland and the majority of the year in Mozambique. It doesn't work like that. So I while I am sympathetic to the idea of having it all, I think that for me it's more that you can have from everything, you can have what you choose. So it was my choice to then move from my happy home in Dublin to my equally happy home in Mozambique that I then spent the next while in. So it really was a big transition, and I had to leave some things behind.
Yeah, and absolutely, it is all about choice. Like for me, my quarter life crisis was leaving the suburbs and becoming a nomad, selling my house, selling everything I owned. And I mean, that is like going from one side of the pendulum to the other. But I wanted that nomad life, and it did involve choice. You know, sometimes transitions, they always do involve choice and choosing what you truly want, right? And that's okay too, right? Sometimes if we want to step into something new, it does involve leaving something behind, and that's what growth and evolution is.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a very big one. It's changing location is big. Changing the style of your life is big. As you said, you went from being someone who was in ongoing kind of 9 to 5 employment. You went through to being a nomad, kind of more working for yourself, working on contracts. So it's just, I also had a similar transition. I went from working in universities to then working for NGOs to then running my own business. So it's really, those shifts are all equally big when they're happening to you. And of course there's changes in relationships as well. So I think we've both gone from some very settled married and then almost married situations through to back to the single life. So these are big life changes too.
Yeah, and they say like the most 3 stressful kind of transitions in someone's life is actually moving. So when you're moving to a new country, you're moving to a new city, retirement is also a big one, right? So again, another big transition, you're moving from potentially a career into something else, and divorce. Another big transition, right? You're leaving a life behind and you're moving into a new one. So those are really the 3 most stressful things. And I mean, everyone has probably at least been through one of them or will be through one of them at some point in their life.
And I think we can throw in there a couple of others just related to children. Not everyone has children, of course, but we can throw in a couple, just like having children is a big transition. And then the children actually leaving home and going off on their own life is a big thing. So that's there. Those are 2 kind of added big transitions if you do have children. It's huge. I particularly, for me, I feel like the retirement episode, I feel like I think of that as a 3/4 life crisis, almost now, going into kind of golden years, going into another phase of life.
Yeah.
But I think sometimes it can be very much pitched as, kind of you've got off the wheel of the of normal life. And so what do you do now? And you can feel, I think people can feel a little bit lost, really.
Yeah. Oh,
They've been,
absolutely.
particularly people who may have gone through doing exactly what they were supposed to do their whole life. They were supposed to go to school, check. They were supposed to get a job, check. They were supposed to make good money and raise a family, check. They're supposed to get their children to the point where they're leaving home, check. They're supposed to pay off the house, check.
Yeah.
And then they kind of retire from the job, and what next?
Right. It's like that idea of what's now, right? What has really helped you when you're going through these transitions to kind of get through them?
It's really helped me to, for a start, throw myself into the transition.
Yeah, like fully embrace and accept
it. Yes, fully embrace it.
Yeah.
And also to take a moment, just as I step, I do this more and more actually, as I step into the new, I take a moment to like own that bittersweetness that comes with whatever I'm saying goodbye to.
Yes.
And a friend of mine says that she misses herself in certain places. So she visits places and she misses herself in them. Like she recognizes an old version of herself who walks amongst that place.
Oh, that's
and I
so
think
cool.
It's very beautiful.
Yeah.
So I think really just to take a moment to say goodbye to the you that wanted this stage that you've been in, that made it happen, that spent the time in it, that enjoyed in it, that went through the highs and the lows, because it's always peaks and troughs, right? It's not always plain sailing for anyone. And then say goodbye to that a little bit, and recognize that that was awesome and perfect for you for the time you were in it. But now, as you change, as life changes, you want something else. You're creating something else.
Right. Yeah. And it's that recognition that there's always an element of grief.
Yes.
In everything, right? Like grief, a lot of the time when we say grief, we think about like someone we love dying, or we think about divorce and breakups. But every transition involves an element of grief because you are losing something, right? So it's like,
absolutely,
it's that recognition of, it's just because maybe you're not feeling super excited about it doesn't mean that it's not right. You could potentially just be grieving, and that's totally normal.
And just also because you have enjoyed something so far, it's okay still if you want to let go of it.
Yes.
You don't need to cling to everything. It's been a beautiful time, but it's okay to want something else, and it's okay to let go. And it does take some time actually to balance those things up, balancing the old against the new.
Yeah.
And it can be very challenging, because if you find you're balancing the old against the new as the old version of you, still thinking on the 5-year plan that you had 15 years ago,
right,
then you get a very different outcome. So I think it's very important to make sure that you're sitting fully within the version of you that you are now, and that you want to be in the next 5 to 10 years.
Yes. Yeah. Absolutely. And taking time to recognize how much you achieved during that time. You know, it's so easy to get caught up on achieving the next goal that we never take time to stop and be like, wait, where I am right now was once a dream of mine. It was once a goal of mine, right? I remember when I sold my house, you know, it's that taking time to sit and be like, wow, owning a house was once a dream, and now I'm selling it, right? And being so grateful for that time in your life and everything you learned. And like, for me, it was like thanking the house. It was thanking the people during that chapter so I could move into the next one with grace and excitement.
Exactly, yeah. And not feeling that you can't create that kind of thing again. Recognizing that actually you're letting go of the house, you've achieved your dream, you've sat in it, you've been within it, but now you want something else. But if in future your dream becomes to have the house again, you can create that again, trusting yourself to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, it's that idea of, well, I've created it once, of course I can create it again, right? So sometimes when people have this fear of letting something go and not being able to have it again, it's just not the case, right? It's remembering you created it once, and if you truly want it, you can have it again.
Yeah, I agree. And I think people do get a little bit stuck in that sometimes. I've really noticed as well that the concept of wealth across the world has been more focused on the idea of collecting and gathering and holding on to things.
Right.
This is not just recent. This is across, you know, hundreds of years. That's been holding on to things and passing them down through families and this kind of thing. Actually, true wealth, as I see it, is, and more, I think this is how it's being seen.
Yeah.
True wealth is in the creation.
Right.
So it's not just being able to create it once, it's being able to create it over and over, being able to flow through it and add to it again, being able to be successful in one way, and then if you want to move on and be successful in another way.
Right.
It's not being confined within the one way that you initially chose when you were maybe 15 years old, and then having to stay within that, clutching onto everything you've created within it.
Exactly. And it really shows that, you know, the power and the magic lies within us, right? It's never about our external world.
Yeah.
It's about that creation within us, right? It's like,
absolutely.
How many stories have you heard about someone who've lost everything and then they rebuild? 10 years later, they're back to where they were, right?
Absolutely. And on the opposite side, there's there's a lot of stories about lottery winners who win what we would think of as, you know, enough to set you up for life. And a few years later, they've spent it all or lost it all, or they're back to kind of their bank balance being relatively as it was before.
Exactly.
Which seems a bit shocking, but it's now becoming a studied you know, issue, because people are showing this on repeat.
Exactly. Yeah. So again, it's that recognition that the power is within us and not that focus so much on external circumstances, right? Recognizing what power do I hold, and we hold the power of creation within us, right? And it's important to remember that when we're transitioning, because it can be a time where you need to have that extra level of belief and confidence in yourself.
Yeah, and I think definitely once we do feel that we have that power and that wealth within us that way, it can alleviate some of the fear.
Yes, for
so
sure.
This helps to move into the excitement of any transition. And of course, not everyone wants to make big transitions. So it might not be that people are choosing to make big transitions. It also might not be that they thought they wanted to, but they might find themselves flowing into it anyway. Because some of my transitions have been expected, and some have been surprising to me.
Right. Yeah. And like maybe something you didn't want. And again, that's kind of like this concept that sometimes potentially we are being guided by something bigger than ourselves, right? Maybe it's like we don't want it on the ego level, but on the soul level, it's like we're being pushed to it for a certain reason. Maybe we don't fully understand at that time, but when you look back, you're like, it makes sense why this all happened, and this actually was serving my highest good.
And this is back to the understanding what's speaking to you or what's speaking through you. Is it your ego or your soul? So back to that idea that the soul is the calm, quiet voice that speaks in a knowing way and doesn't force anything. And whereas the ego is actually that kind of louder voice inside you that actually requests and requires certain things and demands and that kind of thing. So working out which is which. And again, the ego is not a bad thing. The ego is looking to support you and keep you alive. And that is a fundamental in this life we're living. In order to make all the dreams of our soul happen, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And it's kind of looking at like, how can we best tap into that space of intuition rather than the ego, right? And for me, it's kind of when we're in that calm, more flowing state of just being, which a lot of people say is the feminine energy.
Yeah, so I think like the feminine energy is really like the flowing energy of life. It's that ability to flow from one thing to the other. And then the more masculine energy is that energy that is more structured and supportive. I guess sometimes we can feel the feminine is more aligned with our soul calling and the masculine more aligned with our ego.
I would say, I think that comparison. And then also kind of, it's so much more easy for us to be in the masculine because of the way that our world is structured, right?
Yeah.
Just the basic idea of institutions and planning that focus on outcome, that focus on reaching our goals, right? It's kind of the opposite of the feminine idea of just flowing with it, right? So we're very much living in masculine energy a lot of the time without us even realizing it.
Right. And we should point out that when we say masculine energy and feminine energy, we don't mean male and female. So what we mean is that kind of yin and yang balance within us that actually we all have. So we all have feminine energy and masculine energy within us, and we flow between those two ways of being. We can be more in one or more in the other, but it's not related to male and female necessarily.
Yeah, and generally the idea is we kind of have the most balance and flow in life
Mm.
when we are able to best balance those energies. So it's
Mm.
almost like when you have the masculine and then you have the feminine and they kind of like flow together. I think the challenge is because we live in a world where we're kind of surrounded by the masculine, is we tend to be in our masculine most of the time, if not all the time, you
Yeah,
know?
it can tend to feel a bit frightening not to be
Mm-hmm.
sometimes.
Yeah.
The amount of structure surrounding us and
Mm-hmm.
the amount of requirements placed upon us.
Yeah.
I find administrative, as well as
Mm.
institutions, I find administrative tasks are really quite masculine.
It's all masculine.
Yeah, it's
Mm-hmm.
masculine in focus. And
Right.
so then that kind of requires me to go more into my masculine to complete that. Whereas I
Yeah.
find kind of conversational tasks,
Mm-hmm.
creativity, those are more the things that aren't timetabled so much. Those are
Yes.
more in that feminine flow.
Absolutely. Yeah. So when you think of kind of like the traditional work that a lot of us do is going into an office. If you're
Mm,
working for any type of
mm,
institution, it's
mm.
probably a good chance that you're walking into a feminine energy state, right?
Masculine energy
Or
state,
I'm
yeah.
sorry, a masculine energy
Yeah.
state as opposed to a feminine energy, which is
Mm,
more the creative. So maybe like the drawing, the
mm,
writing. But anyone who, for example, works for a corporation, I
mm.
mean, they're literally built on the masculine
Yeah.
energetic structure of outcome, results,
Mm.
very planned oriented.
Yeah, and this
Right.
is where we see that kind of patriarchal and masculine energy
Mm,
coming through our lives
yes.
in a lot of different ways every day.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So much so that we can't necessarily see it anymore.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost the invisible. It's agreed amongst everybody, and that's the way it's been for so long. We almost
Mm-hmm.
can't see it present.
Yeah, absolutely. Like when I look back and when I was doing job with corporate,
Mm,
I was almost always in my masculine
mm,
energy. And
mm.
when I think back, I was also, that was a time in my life when I was most stressed, when I was most anxious, when I was like
Right.
struggling the most
Yeah.
just with life in general, my
Mm,
relationships, my health. It was when I
mm,
was in this state of almost all of the time
mm,
being in my masculine. And I didn't even know what it meant to be in your feminine. And I really didn't learn how to master that even until I'm going to say like being in Bali
mm,
really highlighted
mm,
that for me. But before that, it was
mm.
just like, I didn't know there's a difference, that you can
Yeah.
actually live within different energies and different energies exist within us.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, I
Mm-hmm.
think I spent most of my life heavily drawn
Mm-hmm.
into my masculine side. And I think the way I recognize the difference between the two is when I was strongly in my masculine, it felt like it was me against the universe, it was me
Mm-hmm.
against the world.
Yeah.
Whereas when I'm in my feminine now, more so, it
Mm.
feels more like it's me with the universe.
Right.
And it's much more connected and supportive
Mm-hmm.
than being against everything. Being against
Right.
everything is a losing game, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So the thing is, even if I conquer everything, I've
Yeah.
lost because I'm not
Yeah.
connected.
Right.
And if I lose to everything, which is far more likely,
Mm-hmm.
then I've lost.
Yeah.
So whereas the masculine has this element of disconnect as well,
Mm-hmm.
of
Mm-hmm.
apartness, of separateness, whereas the
Mm-hmm.
feminine has this kind of flow of connectedness. And
Mm-hmm.
we actually really need both. As you said
Yes.
earlier, we need them both to seek together, to flow together in
Yes.
order to function correctly. If we're just in feminine, that doesn't necessarily work for us either, because
Mm-hmm.
that leaves us without structure and without kind of identified purpose to get
Yes.
things through to completion. And so then we can start to feel frustrated, actually, if we're in the feminine too much. We don't have the
Mm-hmm.
structures to make things come to life.
Mm-hmm.
Well, then we feel a bit frustrated with ourselves. We feel a bit lost. We feel a bit,
Yeah.
kind of like we're wandering free, but we're also not really anchored. To be not
Mm-hmm.
anchored can feel good in one way, you're so free, but it
Yes.
can be bad in another way because you can feel like you're kind of hanging loose.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it can lead to stagnation. Like,
Mm,
generally, it's like if you're too and you're feminine, you're very stagnant. You're not
mm,
really moving forward at all. You're kind of
mm,
just being.
mm,
Um, and then you're not accomplishing anything, right? And maybe you have like really low mood, you just don't feel motivated. That's, you know, someone who's too much in the feminine. The masculine is generally anxiety, right? If you're too much in your masculine, you're feeling very anxious because you're extremely goal oriented. You're always trying to control, right? So that's why it's recognizing the value of both, you know, being and doing. We need to rest just as much as we need movement.
And I think different areas of life as well, the masculine and feminine can come up in different ways within us.
Yeah.
So we might be showing one more at work, we might be showing another more at home, we might be showing another more with certain friends, you know, this kind of thing. We kind of flow between them.
Yeah.
And also between our life stages. So in some life stages, we can find we're more in the masculine, and some life stages we find we're more in the feminine.
Yeah, I mean, I know for me, after spending years being more in my masculine, working like a corporate job, that was always numbers based and goals and outcomes. And then I transitioned fully to my feminine of writing, you know, writing 2 books and deciding I'm going to flow with things and start my own business and I'm not going to focus so much. So I kind of literally went from one more to, I wouldn't say 100% feminine, but definitely balancing those energies more. And I can just see how much more things are flowing in my life and how much better things are going relationship wise and just like mentally and physically for me.
Yeah.
I just feel better now that I'm not in that energy of the masculine so much.
Yeah, so you can actually feel that you have more of a balance within your life. Yeah, and I think within that, with developing that balance, we can also find some compassion for ourselves, and we can move away from judgment of ourselves. I think to envelop both the masculine and the feminine in a healthy way is actually to be self-supporting, to support ourselves in whatever way we want to be going forward. Rather than to be self-berating, so putting ourselves down constantly. And again, that's a bit back to what I was saying about how I felt like it was me against the universe versus me with the universe in the feminine. But then actually, I think when they were in balance, when my masculine and feminine were in balance, it was almost like it was me against myself. And now it's me with myself. It's me as a whole, as an integrated, individuated whole, moving forwards. And obviously Jung's theory of individuation, of that progression from early adulthood, so around kind of 20 to 25, through to this fully formed later adulthood. This is actually something that we've seen, we've kind of lost from our society more so. We've lost this path. And it's almost as if we're being artificially kept in that unindividuated state.
Yes. Yeah, kind of like that idea that you finish school and then you get a job and then you get married and you know, check all the boxes and then you have a family. It doesn't really leave a lot of room to be an individual and to kind of step outside that box and be like, wait, but is this actually what I want? And like that's what I went through during my quarter life crisis, is that wait, like I have it all, but do I actually want this?
Exactly. Right? I have it, do I want it? Yeah. Because, and that can be a very difficult one to deal with because you've made it happen and you've done what you were supposed to. So it can be very challenging then to turn around and find that you're not happy. And it can also feel kind of selfish. And I found that at that stage, I was turning around trying to make myself bad and wrong for not wanting what everyone had told me I needed to produce and have.
Right.
I sat there in a gorgeous place that I'd created, in a wonderful job, permanent job that I'd created. Doing the things I should do. Now, why wasn't I complete? Why wasn't I fully happy?
Yeah, and I think that alone can cause so much confusion because it's like we're told that once we achieve that, we will be happy.
Right.
So I was just like, but wait, what's wrong with me? Like, why aren't I happy? And then it's so easy to internalize that and think like, what's wrong with me?
Yeah. And it's not even that it's always that we get to that stage and then we don't want it. Maybe we enjoy it for a few years, but then something changes within us, within the society around us. You know, it's just change is a constant.
Right.
So everything is changing, and therefore we can change away and want something else instead.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think that's very much kind of the feminine of accepting that change is constant and learning to be able to flow with it instead of staying stuck. Kind of that idea of not moving and maybe resisting change is when those energies also can get off balance. And then that's when things in life can really spiral too. Like I went through that phase, I know, of denial in my quarter life crisis, that like I didn't want to accept that I needed to change my life in order to start feeling better, right? It's like, and the more I fought it, the more sick I started to become, like just low energy, like mentally not doing well, like physically you could see it in my body. Like the more I fought the change, like the more literally sick that I became.
Wow. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
that I can really understand that, because
Yeah.
I've come across a lot of people who've said that to me and described that
Mm-hmm.
circumstance, but they can't
Yeah.
always see that the two things are
Are
connected.
connected.
So it's really
Yeah.
beautiful to hear you talk about how the two things are so
Yeah.
clearly connected for you.
Mm-hmm.
I definitely agree with you. I think
Yeah.
that if we keep ourselves in that area of stagnation in our
Mm,
lives,
yeah.
because we fear moving forwards, maybe because we
Mm-hmm.
have that anxiety about moving forwards,
Yeah.
or because we don't want to let go of something that we already have. I
Mm-hmm.
think though that unfortunately we move forwards into things where we're kind of numbing ourselves
Right.
to life, because we're not
Yes.
any longer in a life that we want to live,
Mm-hmm.
and we're avoiding the problem. So this is
Mm-hmm.
where I guess we start to buy more and more things and bring more and more things
Right.
into our life,
Yes.
hoping that that will fill the gap, hoping that that will
More.
fill the void.
Yes. Some more and more
But
consumption and
yeah, but
like,
unfortunately, it doesn't
yeah.
really.
Mm-hmm.
So we're still kind of there facing these life transitions and these
Yes.
life choices, and when we look away, they just keep knocking louder and louder
Yes.
on the door.
Yeah.
There's more. They're there
Mm-hmm.
waiting for us, no matter what we do.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like knock, knock. And if you
Mm.
continue to resist, then things can become more
Mm.
challenging until sometimes you're forced to flow with it, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely. I
Yeah.
think it's, and I would definitely say that I've learned in life that
Mm.
rather than being forced, being backed into a corner,
Mm.
I think it's better to step into it, to jump into it, to
Mhm.
welcome it, look
Mhm.
towards the excitement with compassion for the fear, because the
Yes.
fear is there. That's
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
But I think looking towards the excitement and seeing what we can make from this, and
Mhm.
obviously communicating it to everybody else.
Mhm.
Communicating, if you want to change your job, you
Yeah.
can communicate to your job that actually you've had a great time there, that it's not them, it's not the
Mhm.
place that's not a great place to work. Maybe it's, if that's the truth, maybe you can communicate to them that actually it's you and you want something else now.
Mhm. Mhm.
Maybe you can communicate with a partner, with
Mhm.
family, with
Mhm.
friends.
Mhm.
I'm having a great time doing all of this, but I actually want to add this to my life. I want to
Right.
change life up in this way,
Mhm.
and see about how you can work with people to
Mhm.
make those things happen. But making sure that you don't lose yourself
Yeah.
in other people's wants.
Right.
It's really important in our compromises that we don't lose ourselves. So
Mm.
compromise should be something that works in some way for everyone.
Mhm.
And if
Mhm.
it's not working for you, then it's not a compromise on your part,
Right.
giving in.
Yeah, and
So yeah.
losing, I know that was something I struggled with in my relationships for the longest time, was like I
Mm,
would lose myself
mm,
in my relationships.
yeah.
So that's been like a big part of like my healing journey, is like being so comfortable in yourself and knowing who you are, that
Mm,
you don't lose yourself when you enter into new relationships. And it's still
yeah.
just having that self-awareness.
That's
Right.
huge. Yeah, that's really, really
Mhm.
huge.
Mhm.
So their limerence, that idea of
Mhm.
just becoming lost within any kind of connection or relationship.
Yes.
And we think about it happening in a partner relationship, but
Mhm.
actually it can happen in friendships and in family connections
Oh,
as well.
definitely.
You can
Yeah.
lose yourself to the other person's dominance. And
Mhm.
it might not look obvious to the outside world,
Mm.
because in limerence it's more a case of you actually suppressing who you are and
Right.
changing who you are to fit in
Yes.
with them, rather than
Yes.
them forcing you to.
Right.
It's more an active choice on your part.
Mhm.
But yeah, that's really important, and I think it's
Mhm.
definitely something that factor comes into these life changes and life transitions,
Mhm.
because the more we are not expressing who we truly are, the
Mhm.
more often we'll find ourselves facing these large shifts,
Yeah.
because we're not heading towards who we truly want to be and who we truly
Mhm.
are within ourselves.
Yes.
So the more distance we make between who we truly are and who we are literally being in life.
Mm-hmm.
The further there is to go to get there.
Right. Yeah. Like they say, the longer you stay on the train going the wrong way, the more expensive it is to get the train back.
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly. Yeah.
So yeah, that recognition.
Yeah.
And again, that comes with self-awareness, and it comes with knowing yourself. So, tying this back to the first session on the relationship house, right? It's like the more sturdy and strong that house is, the easier transitions become, because you have trust in yourself.
Yeah.
You know yourself, you have compassion for yourself, right? So all of those things can make life transitions much more smooth.
Yeah, and also talking to someone. I mean, finding someone to talk to you about these life transitions, finding someone you can be honest with about how you're feeling about it, even in your confusion. So that's a really important point, actually, because sometimes we can't really understand ourselves until we hear ourselves. So I don't know if you've ever had that, where you've been talking to somebody and you've really only realized you think or feel a certain way as it's coming out of your mouth.
Yeah.
So it can really help us actually to be free in what we're saying and free in what we're being, in order to really find what we want next within that.
Yeah, and sometimes just talking to someone can help you come up with new ideas, right? Like you're talking and then you say something, you're like, oh, actually I never thought of it like that. And it's like, and writing can have this too, which is why I would always encourage clients to write. And like I loved writing as well. Sometimes just having something in your head is one thing, and writing it down or verbalizing it is a different thing. Like it helps with processing. So sometimes just sitting and writing, like then you see the words on the page, it really helps you see things differently, right? So during these transitions, on top of having that self-compassion, sometimes verbalizing it to a friend, a therapist, a coach, whatever, can be really helpful. Or even just writing it down, taking like 15 minutes a day to write in your journal what is coming up for you.
Yeah, and there's different ways to journal, because obviously we're both writers as well.
Yes.
And so one of the things that one of the tools we use in writing is morning pages. So this is the idea of getting up maybe 10 or 15 minutes early and just making some time to fill a page with whatever comes straight out of your head. So don't filter it. Don't fact check it. Just let it flow. Don't worry about your handwriting, or you can do it on a keyboard if you find the flow is there for that. For some people it is, and for some people it isn't. And just letting it fall out. And it's quite nice to do this first thing in the morning, because there's this kind of in-between space between being asleep and being awake, where you're kind of more connected to your subconscious. And so this might be the space where you kind of half remember your dreams as well. And so your dreams are also speaking to you, trying to tell you certain things. So, and helping you process and focus on certain things. So actually, that's a great time in the morning to work through doing these morning pages. Just do one to start with, see how you get on.
Yeah, that idea of just free writing. And I like that, doing that in the morning as well, because it's like you're kind of coming out of that other level of consciousness and you're a little more connected, say, to your soul as opposed to your ego. Whereas the more we go throughout the day, the more enmeshed we become in this dimension, right? And the more we generally start living within the ego. And then it's a different feeling. And the ideas you come up with will be different than if you're writing in the morning and you're still kind of connected more to the subconscious.
Absolutely. And then just really finding mechanisms to actually connect with ourselves in a playful, light-hearted way. Just, getting out and trying something new, or thinking within yourself, what did I used to enjoy and I haven't done recently? And getting out and just, trying those things, doing those things, just having fun, just recognizing that part of life, part of the beauty of life is to be in the joy of living it.
Yes.
And it doesn't need to have any other higher or greater purpose necessarily. Not everything needs to have a higher or greater purpose. Some things can be just for joy, just for lightness. So letting that inner child or inner teenager or inner young person within you, because we gather them all and we bring them with us through life. So letting those versions of you actually erupt out again in creative and inspiring ways.
Yeah, and it's like it's taking that time for creativity, right?
Mm.
Like speaking about being more in the feminine, like one
Mm.
of the best ways to do that is to actually take time to just be
Mm.
creative, right?
Mhm.
Because a lot of the time we don't do that. Our lives are so structured and we're so busy. It's like, work Monday to Friday, 9 to 5, come home, cook dinner. If you have kids, it's, getting the kids ready for bed. Like, it's looking at your life and being like, how much time do I actually have for creativity and just to not do anything? Because it's in those moments where you get the answers that maybe you're seeking for, right? Maybe you're asking for them in your meditations, in your prayers. But if we don't take time to receive the answers,
Mhm.
when do you think you're going to get them,
So, and
right?
this, like the morning pages, might be about
Mhm.
that masculine and feminine balance. So,
Mhm.
the feminine is the free flow, but the
Yes.
masculine is the form. And so, within creativity, sometimes you need to have the form to give you freedom. So,
Mhm.
this is where maybe you schedule some time, you schedule yourself, 10, 15 minutes in the morning for your morning
Mhm.
pages, or 10, 15 minutes, some space in the day, maybe lunchtime, maybe a coffee break, something like that, or later in the evening, just to create, just to sit down and
Mhm.
do some kind of creative project that you're
Yes.
interested in.
Yeah. And I mean, when you look at people who, have gotten book ideas, who've started
Mm.
businesses, it's all been in the feminine.
Mm-hmm.
It's not been in the masculine, right?
Mm.
It's they've taken time, even maybe when they were on the train
Mm.
on the way to friends or work,
Mm.
and they got ideas. Or
Yeah.
maybe they were laying in bed that morning and didn't rush out of bed to get ready for work, and like something came up and they
Mm.
wrote it down, right? But it is in those moments of being in quiet contemplation that we get the best ideas and sometimes
Mm.
answers to what we may be asking the universe
Mm.
for.
Yeah,
Right?
and yeah, it's back through to that idea that inspiration needs to find you working in a way,
Mhm.
needs to find you paying attention to it at
Mhm.
least.
Mhm.
So yeah, that can be really, really important to do that. I think as well, just focusing on being where we're at is very important
Mhm.
in the flow of life changes.
Mm.
So actually being fully in the moment we're in
Right.
and enjoying that,
Mhm.
creating that grounded presence where
Mhm.
we can fully participate in the present moment. I
Mhm.
think that can be very, very important. And
Yes.
I know that for me as a child, a lot of people referred to me as an old soul.
Mm.
And I kind of cringe when people refer to children that way now. In
Mm.
fact, I sometimes literally cringe because that was because I was carrying some pressures on me. That
Mm.
wasn't how I wanted to be. That was how I thought I had to be in
Mm.
order to be okay, in order to
Mm.
have all the boxes checked, in
Mm.
order for society and everyone around me to think I was
Mm.
okay, I was doing right.
Mm.
And so I don't really think that we do need to embody this kind of older version of ourselves
Mm.
sooner. I think
Mm.
there is a liberation of that younger self. And if
Mm.
it didn't happen when you were younger, you can
Right.
liberate it now. It's
Right.
perfectly possible to liberate that joy and fun and
Right.
laughter now,
Mhm.
and have it in alongside everything else. So we don't
Mhm.
need to miss out on those previous phases of life. Sometimes there can
Mhm.
be some grief involved in realizing maybe I didn't live the childhood I wanted to live. Maybe
Right.
I didn't live the way I wanted to. I wasn't
Mhm.
open and free enough as who I
Mhm.
was.
Mhm.
But we can do that later on. We
Can
can
do
do
it
that now.
now. Yeah,
Yeah.
and I think that's huge, and it's kind of that idea of doing the inner child work, right? That
Mm.
we all, even as adults, as our current selves, we still have our past selves and we still have that
Mm.
inner child that lives
Mm.
within us, and it
Mm.
doesn't go away. It sits within us, right?
Mm.
And the more that we are able to feed it and acknowledge it
Mm.
and give it what it wants, the more it just
Mm.
becomes integrated as part of our current self, and the more healed it becomes, so we can step into our best self
Yeah.
now and not be controlled by the wounded inner child, right?
Absolutely, yeah. So this is the idea that that child is satiated, as like has got the
Mhm.
ability to express themselves in the way that they want, and
Mhm.
so they're not feeling neglected or left behind, or they're not feeling they have to try and
Mhm.
demand something, because you're making the space and you're giving the time
Mhm.
to actually find that joy and expression in life.
And a lot of
Mm.
the time this comes in the form of creativity as well. Like when you think
Mm.
about how creative children are, like they're
Mm.
always building blocks, they're always drawing
Mm.
things, they're always,
Mm.
doing things in their
Mm.
creative mode, right? In the feminine.
And
And
inquisitive as well.
yes,
Just
yeah.
this being inquisitive and interested, be
Mhm.
curious about life.
Mhm.
It doesn't
Mhm.
always have to be creativity in the way of doing art or writing.
Mhm.
It could
Mhm.
be getting creative by thinking up something new in lines of your business. It could be
Mhm.
getting
Yeah.
just outside and exploring a bit in nature. Children
Mhm.
are obviously always interested now exploring in
Right.
nature, usually.
Yes.
But
Yeah.
I mean, even now, kids are spending a lot of time on computer games and they're kind of
Mhm.
exploring those other worlds. So that's a
Yes.
possibility as well. Maybe it's games of that kind that someone
Mhm.
wants to get back to.
Yeah, so really it's kind of, harnessing that creativity in a way that feels right to you. And
Mm.
sometimes naturally that does help with honoring and tapping
Mm.
into that inner child as well, which can
Yeah.
be really healing. And it can also help people live more within the feminine, which,
Mm.
as we get older, it's very easy to not live within
Mm.
that at all. And I know personally for me, I love being more in my feminine. Like I'm definitely
Mm.
more feminine than I am masculine,
Mm.
right?
Yeah, I think it's
Mm-hmm.
beautiful for everyone to take the path they choose and that works for
Mhm.
them. I
Mhm.
know in the past I lived a lot in my masculine,
Mhm.
and now I live a lot more balanced life.
Yes. Yeah.
I think between the masculine and the feminine. So
Mhm.
I think it really just depends who you are as a person.
Mhm.
But I think it's
Mhm.
always worth questioning yourself. Who am I living more in my masculine or am I living more in my feminine?
Mhm.
Learning to
Mhm.
recognize it and then not just taking it for granted,
Mhm.
maybe trying to balance it up a bit by adding a little of the
Yes.
opposite,
Right.
or also asking yourself to spend half a day or even an hour living in the opposite version. So if you spend most of the time
Yes.
in the masculine, spend an hour focusing on living in your feminine. See how it
Mhm.
feels.
Yes.
Because
Yeah.
putting these two together in whatever combination is bespokely, is
Mhm.
individually right for each one of us,
Mhm.
this is the key to living as who we each uniquely are.
Mhm.
And that's
Definitely.
the goal. That's where the
Yes.
peace and the happiness, the inner kind of
Mhm.
tranquility actually
Mhm.
lies, is to
Yes.
live as who we truly authentically are.
Absolutely. Yeah. So
Mm.
identifying, am I more in my masculine and feminine, and
Mm.
remembering, with the masculine, if you're feeling anxious, if you're feeling like you're trying to force things, if you feel like you're trying to control outcomes, these are all signs that you are more in the masculine. If you're more in the feminine, you may be feeling stagnant. You might be feeling a little more down, low mood, like nothing is happening around you. So
Mm.
it's, if you're in the masculine, then it's aiming to be more in the feminine with free flow and try not to control everything. Maybe letting things just go where they need to go. And if you're very much more in the feminine, it's stepping more into the masculine. It's asking, okay, what can I do today to help get me closer to my goals? What actionable steps can I take?
Mm.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's beautiful. So you feel that you live more in your feminine
Yeah.
now.
Oh,
Yeah.
I feel like I've really, at this point now, because I've become so aware of the energies, that I've really
Mm.
mastered them. Like, I kind of know when I need to be more in my feminine and know when I need to step more into the masculine. So
Mm.
now I kind of have like a beautiful flow between
Mm.
both. But it was a while where at one point I was just all in my masculine and then I was
Mm.
just like all in my feminine. I wasn't
Mm-hmm.
really like doing much to work towards anything. And I think it's, because I've lived in both those energies, that I'm able to identify them and then kind of find a common flow between the two. So I
Mm.
can say I do live in both energies, but I do love being more in the feminine. And
Yeah.
I find that I'm more in my feminine when I'm around people who are more in their masculine, who can kind of help me balance that energy
Mm.
as well, right? So I do tend to gravitate more, especially to men who are more in their masculine, because
Yeah.
it allows me to live in my feminine, and that's what I do like
And we're talking
appreciate
the healthy
more
masculine, people
in
who
the
are living in the
healthy
healthy
masculine, which
masculine,
is
yeah.
really important to note,
Which
right?
is not really about dominance at all. It's
Yes.
about ownership of their own way.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's
Yeah.
not like that toxic
Mm.
masculinity,
Mm-hmm.
it's the healthy masculine,
Mm.
right?
Yeah, because I found that the kind of toxic traits of both masculine and feminine have been
Mm.
kind of spun out in this theory of the twin flame,
Oh, yes.
and I feel like this is perpetuating maybe some of the negatives of both
Mm.
the masculine and the feminine,
Yes.
and kind of purporting it to be like showing it to be a a good thing
Yeah.
when actually is anybody really enjoying that drama? And if they
Mm-hmm.
are enjoying that drama, are they enjoying it because they were raised in drama and they find
Mm-hmm.
drama is the only way to feel safe?
Yes.
Because for a long time, I thought that drama was a great thing to have
Mm-hmm.
in particularly like partner relationships that kept the spark alive. But now I really recognize that actually that the tranquility and the peace
Mm-hmm.
is worth so much more.
Right.
So, and it doesn't mean that the spark can't be there,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it's kind of making sure that you're not reliving trauma, that your
Mm,
relationships aren't a response to
mm,
just trauma from your
mm,
past, right? So,
yeah,
again, that idea of attachment versus connection, if
mm,
relationships are constantly up
mm,
and down, it
mm,
could potentially be a trauma response.
mm,
It could potentially be more of an attachment relationship rather than a connection based relationship, which means we're living more in our past traumas and reliving them rather than stepping into our healthy, authentic
mm.
adult selves, which is more connection.
Yeah, so I really have enjoyed connecting with my kind of healthy feminine and healthy
Mhm.
masculine.
Mhm.
I definitely think that I was living more in the unhealthy masculine
Mm.
version of me in the
Mhm.
past. And I think now I'm living more in a healthy balance.
Mm.
I really notice that I enjoy the balance. I enjoy
Mhm.
being kind of self supported. So, my
Mhm.
feminine supported by myself, but my own masculine, but also
Mhm.
by the external masculine as well. And feeling
Mhm.
stimulated by the external feminine, kind of feeling
Mhm.
inspired by
Mhm.
what's out there as well. So,
Mhm.
that beautiful flow, I can really
Yes.
feel that moving within me now and that balance.
Right. Yeah.
Mm,
Yeah. And we can feel it because we generally feel more balanced emotionally, physically.
mm,
Our health is better,
yes.
right? It doesn't, it's the same physically with our body. Our body loves homeostasis,
Mm-hmm.
right? And it's the same when it comes to the masculine feminine energy. Our body
Mm,
loves to have the balance between the
mm-hmm.
two. It's when we'll feel most at peace, right? And
Mm.
I can tell when I get into a place where I'm starting to feel anxious and force and control. I'm like, okay, I'm too much in my masculine. How can I sit back now and take a breath and maybe focus on balancing that energy, right? And
Absolutely. And it's not
mhm,
about getting it right once and that's the check done.
mhm,
It's
yeah,
about that dynamic flow. It's about that constant,
mhm,
like as in the body, the homeostasis. It's
yes,
actually developing that the same way as it's
mhm,
developing the capacity to create the wealth for yourself that
mhm,
then creates what I think of as true wealth.
yes,
It's actually developing the capacity to
mhm,
notice whether you're in the masculine, whether you're in the feminine,
mhm,
and bring yourself back to
yeah,
a balance point between them, or even just to kind of challenge yourself and flip move between them. I've
mhm,
been in my masculine a lot. What's it like if I look at the same situation,
right,
but what if I look at it from the feminine? What if I look
exactly,
at it or maybe I've been in the feminine with this
yeah,
situation. What if I trust myself to look at it in the masculine
mhm,
and see
yeah,
what I feel like that way? What do you
yeah.
think? Have you got some tips where people can notice if they're in their masculine or feminine and how they can then choose to transform themselves
Mhm.
into the opposite for fun?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And I think it's learning that there's more than one energy to even exist within,
Mm,
right? Like I was saying before, I didn't even realize like there was more than one energy to live within, right? And this is common for people maybe who were raised by parents who were always in their masculines,
mm,
right? And I think like one way to identify is, I mean, and it's so easy for us to live in our masculine just because institutions and life is structured around the masculine. But yeah, if you're feeling overly anxious about something, or you are trying to force something, and you feel like you're pushing, and it's almost like you're chasing it all the time, and you're chasing leads, and you're trying to, and then you're feeling frustrated. You're definitely 100% in the masculine. You're doing the opposite of the feminine, which is taking a step back, breathing, letting things flow, trusting that things are going to work out exactly as they're meant to. Maybe reminding yourself that even though I want this so bad, how do I not know there's something better waiting for me if I can just drop the reins and learn how to
right.
breathe, right?
Exactly. So this is a really good example that came up to me for me this today actually, is
Mm,
that somebody had an appointment with me later on and they changed it. And instead of being frustrated by the fact that I'd kind of planned things around making sure I was available for that appointment, I thought to myself, well, you know, actually, what's that opening up in my day? What's that
mm,
making space for? what's that making possibility for? How can I choose for this to be a good thing? And actually, the whole day is now flowing better because of it.
Right.
So this can be just this difference in perspective, this kind of taking myself out of the masculine, which was the structure and control, and taking myself into the feminine of, okay, let it flow. Let's see what's coming.
Yeah. It's that recognition that sometimes there's a better plan, bigger than yourself, that you don't even realize, right? And if we can step out of the masculine, we can let the universe show us that, right? Maybe there's a plan that's even better than we could have imagined.
Exactly. Right? Yeah, we can only, when we look to obtain what we expect, we can only obtain something based upon what we've already encountered. So we can only have what we've already noticed in the world. But actually, when we allow and we open up to what we've never encountered, it can be even more fantastic than anything we could have thought up. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for joining us on this session of Soul Therapy.
And we look forward to seeing you in the next session.
Thanks for joining us. We'd love to connect with you live in our group sessions.
Join our online membership to spend weekly group sessions with us, where we will be talking about topics such as depression, anxiety, burnout, relationships, family problems, and addictions, as we work with you to develop your health and well-being.
In addition, this includes access to a private Telegram group, weekly actionable exercises with guaranteed general feedback from us. The 12-week membership comes with an exclusive offer of reduced price one-to-one sessions with us for the duration of the 12-week membership.
A lot can change in 12 weeks. Come and join us and jump into the life you choose.
Remember that to get the most out of these soul therapy sessions, whether the free podcast series or the membership, we advise full participation in all the suggested exercises.
Throw yourself into this fully and become the you that you have always dreamed of being.